It's almost hard to imagine what life was like before Marvel Studios was releasing thousands of movies to the movie theaters today. But there was a time when superhero movies were not a popular thing, and most people only watched superheroes on television through cartoons or reading them through comics. Today we're going to look at the evolution and process of superhero fans, how it all started from cartoons and comic books to the big screens today, and how the superhero fandom has grown tremendously to this day.
All right, so prior to Marvel coming out with the MCU back in 2008, one of my big things was that my grandfather actually owned a comic book store. So he would always give my brother and I a lot of the older comics like Spider-Man and X-Men. So that's kind of where it all first started back when I was like 4 or 5. So that would have been early 2000s. After that, like I kind of got into the Batman series, so it was like kind of DC, and back when they came out with the original Spider-Man movies, so that was back in also the early 2000s, I guess. But yeah.
Growing up, I wasn't a huge fan of the Marvel movies, or really any superhero movies for that matter. I do remember watching Hulk, Batman movies, Spider-Man movies. I wasn't really into it.
So my interest with superheroes has been around ever since I was a young kid. Me and my brothers would watch the old Marvel cartoons on the Disney channels, like the Spider-Man cartoons, the X-Men cartoons. We didn't have a lot of comic books, but that's just kind of how we were into the superheroes, is we would watch the cartoons, and it was pretty great. Movie-wise, there wasn't too many movies for us to watch that were superhero related, aside from the Spider-Man movies with Tobey Maguire, which I thought were very well done. I also thought that the Batman movies, although not Marvel, they were DC, were done very well as well. Starting it off with the hero that started it all for the MCU, Iron Man. Iron Man came out in early 2008 with a not so well-known superhero at the time, a risky lead actor, a genre that hadn't really done much other than Christopher Nolan's Batman. This movie had a lot to prove, and did it ever. It proved that superhero movies can be realistic, emotional, funny, and have entertaining action. This is the movie that launched the MCU and started the shared universe that DC Comics and other franchises are following today. Not to mention, it got audiences to love Robert Downey Jr. as the beloved Tony Stark and Iron Man. The next entry and hero into the Marvel Cinematic Universe is the Incredible Hulk. Coming just a few months after the release of Iron Man, Marvel was not holding back on their moves. Casting Edward Norton as the famous Bruce Banner proved to be an excellent choice for the Marvel franchise. The Incredible Hulk was another big step in the right direction for Marvel, and it made audiences forget about the previous attempts at making a Hulk movie. Coming a few years later down the road, and after an Iron Man sequel, Marvel introduced to audiences an almost forgotten hero, Thor. If the Spider-Man trilogy set a new standard for superhero movies, Iron Man upped the ante, and then Thor raised the bar again. Chris Hemsworth as the Norse god Thor and Tom Hiddleston as his villainous brother Loki showed that they both were star quality and proof of Marvel's tremendous ability to pick the perfect actors to portray their heroes.
Fate is in his own hands now.
The last hero introduced into the MCU is almost everyone's favorite superhero, beloved Captain America, played by Chris Evans. Again, Marvel did an excellent job at casting their lead actor for their hero. Everyone almost has fallen in love with Chris Evans, and they cannot see the MCU without him today. After all the heroes were introduced into the MCU, Marvel did something that no one was expecting and that no one had done at the time. They crossed over all the heroes into one movie, and boy was it an epic adventure. The Avengers blew away audiences by the crossing of all the superhero stories into one cohesive event. Everyone was blown away by the tremendous quality and action in the movie Avengers. This movie really propelled the Marvel universe into their next phase. This marked the completion of Phase 1 and started the jump into Phase 2, which provided a lot of sequels, including Iron Man 3, Thor 2, Captain America 2, and many others, including another Avengers sequel. Since then, Marvel is currently in Phase 3 and about to move into Phase 4. It has introduced many new heroes, including Ant-Man, Black Panther, Spider-Man, and the Guardians of the Galaxy.
So when Marvel introduced the MCU in 2008 with Iron Man, I really enjoyed that movie, and like the follow-ups to it were fantastic. But one of the things I don't know if I really like that much is how Marvel's kind of turned into this big business where they're just busting out 2 movies a year. Even though they've definitely kept up with the quality, I would say. One of the things I don't know how well they're going to keep up with will be how the stories are going to progress, because they're almost catching up to a lot of where the comic books are starting to cut off. So obviously they have phases with Stan Lee, the creator of a lot of the comic book characters, but it's kind of just hard to tell where they're going to go with it. So even though it's hard to say in that aspect, I definitely enjoy the movies. Some of my favorites would be Iron Man, Guardians of the Galaxy, Doctor Strange was great, and that's about it.
I didn't start watching Marvel movies until recently, and I don't necessarily think it was because I wanted to personally. I think it had a lot to do with my boyfriend wanting to see them, and I just got roped into watching them. There were 3 movies that really stuck out to me. One was Captain America: Civil War, Guardians of the Galaxy, and then Spider-Man: Homecoming. Out of the 3, Guardians of the Galaxy was probably my favorite. I really enjoyed watching all 3 of them, and I think it's just because they're more humorous and more modern and, I don't know, more entertaining to watch. The second one would be Spider-Man, because I watched him growing up, and I feel like this had like a really nice twist to it rather than like the rest of the movies prior to it. So it was different in a good way. And then Civil War, I liked it, but not being like a huge superhero fan, not really knowing the background of all the superheroes, I was a little indifferent about it, knowing that like they're all good guys, and yet they were all trying to kill each other. So that kind of threw me off a little bit while watching it. It was still a good movie overall. But all in all, like I'm not opposed to watching superhero movies, whether it starts or stops at Marvel or other movies, and for that fact.
But Marvel really took off in 2008, I think, when they started off with Iron Man and the MCU universe. That kind of pushed my superhero enthusiasm up a little bit. Whereas before I would only talk about my superhero likes and dislikes with my brothers, kind of like in close quarters. Back then it wasn't really cool to talk about superheroes, I guess, out in public or to other people. You would kind of see them as like a nerd. But with Marvel putting out movies out all the time, with a new movie every year, they seem to be gathering new fans and creating new superhero fans. So now it seems more like it's publicly okay to talk about superheroes. Like it's not even like a nerd thing anymore. Like it's a cool thing if you watch the Marvel movies and you're a fan of the superheroes. So I think that's pretty cool. It definitely gives a bigger audience, and it makes me feel okay about liking superheroes now. I really enjoy pretty much all the Marvel movies. There are some that are better than others, of course, but for the most part, Marvel's in a a very great job in the direction they're going, making the movies, and the actors that they picked to portray the heroes. If I had to pick some of my favorites, I'd say I really like the new Spider-Man Homecoming movie. Spider-Man's my favorite superhero, so seeing Tom Holland in that new movie was very refreshing. I think Marvel did a great job with that. I also really like Guardians of the Galaxy. That was a very fresh and new idea with the superhero universe. A lot of people were not familiar with the Guardians of the Galaxy, including myself. When I saw the trailer, I was very confused. I wasn't very sure what was going to happen, but I was very surprised and happy with what came out. I also like all the Captain America movies. I think all 3 of those are done very well. I like the very first Iron Man movie, the one that started it all. I thought that was made very well, and they knocked it out of the park by picking Robert Downey Jr. as the lead role for Iron Man. As for where the future is going to take us with the Marvel Universe, I hope that Marvel just continues the same things that they've been doing, because they've been making me happy, and I can only imagine all the other Marvel fanboys and superhero fanboys out there that are just as happy as I am.